Hey you guys, something that's been coming up a lot for me in lessons recently with players rated under 1000 is this idea of what do you do once you've developed your pieces, right? What do you do in the middle game? So I'm going to attempt to resolve that and help you out now. And we're going to use a very simple game plan, okay? And you need to appreciate the way that a game of chess evolves. Okay, so I'm going to play knight to c3 now. So the first thing that you have to take account of always is first of all king safety. Okay, and you have to respond to what your opponent does. Right, never take your eye off what your opponent's doing, because there could be tactical evolutions in the game that demand a response. Okay, so there could be a threat, there could be an opportunity, right? So the first thing to bear in mind is always king safety, and the second thing is, are there any immediate threats or immediate opportunities that could demand prompt you to take immediate action? So generally this is the way to think about it. You will always have a plan, right? So the plan is first in the opening development, okay? In the middle game we'll come on to, and then the ending. So you've always got your plan of how you want to progress. However, you know, for example, here we have the pawns come forward to d5. So there's now two attackers on this pawn, only one defender. So I need to respond to that. And there's a few things I could do, right? I could push a pawn forwards to defend it. I could develop a bishop to defend it. I could put my queen on e2 to defend it, or I could capture. And I think in this case I'm going to take the pawn. Okay, so that is a tactical diversion, right? That has been prompted by my opponent's action. So you always have to take account of what your opponent's doing. And now we have tension here between the knights. So I'm in the opening right now, and the key in the opening is to develop. You need to develop minimum 2 pawns in order to be able to release your bishop. So the light squared bishop needs either the e pawn or the g pawn to move, and the dark squared bishop needs either the b pawn or the d pawn to move. And that's why very often you get the central, the d and e pawns both moving in an opening, or you'll get like g3, b3, or likewise moving b6 or g6 for black. So what do we do here? So there is a potential threat, and I need to now evaluate that threat. So if knight takes my knight, am I unhappy about that? No, I'm not. I think that's okay. I can recapture, probably with the b pawn. So now what I'm going to do is I'm putting pressure back on the knight. So now I've got 2 attackers on that knight, and it's only defended once by the queen. I've also developed my bishop, so now I'm preparing to castle. So you need to develop minimum 2 pawns. You need to bring out your knights. You need to bring out your bishops. You need to get your queen off the back rank and then connect your rooks. That is the default normal plan. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to castle my king. Okay. And you can do these things in different orders depending on the situation and what it calls for. So this is interesting. So here, if I'd captured with my knight, he captures and then he gets these 2 central pawns, which is nice. My opponent's rated 803. Okay, so what have I got left to do? Well, I need to develop my bishop on c1, but I can't do that right now because as we've seen, there is a tactical threat now. So he's attacking my bishop with his pawn. So I've got some options here. I could capture the knight with the bishop. I could retreat the bishop to b3. I could capture the knight with my knight, and then he's got a decision to make of how to recapture. Yeah. So if I take the knight with my knight and he captures my knight with his pawn, I take his pawn with my bishop with check. Okay. Alternatively, if I take there and he recaptures with the pawn, I take his pawn on b5 with my knight. So either way could be good. I think I'd like to keep my bishop right now, so I'm going to capture with the knight and see what he does. If he takes the bishop with his pawn, I retreat my knight, and he's got doubled and isolated pawns. Okay, so now I can capture the pawns. That is a tactical diversion, and this is fine, okay? Because while I have been diverted from development, so has my opponent, okay? So now, what's the situation? I still want to complete development, but now there is tension again on the board. So what do? I can retreat, but that square's no good on c4. d3 might block in some stuff, I don't know. But d3 isn't good because it would prompt e4 from my opponent, so I'm actually going to trade off bishops at this point. Queen recaptures, then the pawn on e5 is available. If the knight recaptures, that's the better move. Okay, so now what am I doing? Okay, I'm back to the plan. There's no immediate threat, there's no immediate opportunity, back to the plan. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to centralize my rook now. Yes, I still want to develop my bishop. Yes, I still want to get my queen off the back rank. Okay, but putting my rook here has a tactical idea because now I've got two attackers on this pawn. My opponent is also slightly behind in development and has weaker pawns. And now he's made a pawn move. Right? This is a pawn move that doesn't help develop this bishop. That bishop already has a route into the board, but because of this threat that I created by this choice of opening move order, he's now decided to push a pawn, which doesn't help in his development. Now what I'm going to do is play d4, because this pawn on e5 cannot capture because it's pinned by the rook that I just put there, right? Rooks like to be on open files, semi-open files, and or in line with your opponent's king, right? Very, very simple. So now, you see, with that move, that's another tactical threat. So now I have pawn, knight, and rook looking at this e5 pawn. For some reason, it's not letting me draw my arrows today. So I'm quite lost without my arrows. So I've got three attackers on there. So again, that's putting pressure on my opponent. And I might also think about bringing my bishop out. The problem with the bishop is he's got all these dark squared pawns on there. So this diagonal that the bishop's on right now, I'm going to have to wave the bishop around to show you, is not good for my bish, right? But now I'm looking towards completing the opening and getting into the middle game. Right then, so the pawn's still pinned, that's fine. He's developed a bishop, but he's developed it not to a great position because it's now busy defending this pawn. So what do I want to do now? I want to get my bishop into the game, and or my queen. And what's the best way to do that? I'm wondering about pushing b3. Yeah, b3, and then I can put my bishop on b2, and guess what? It's a fourth attacker on that pawn. Yeah, if I put my bishop here, it's lining up behind my pawn, my d4 pawn, as a 1, 2, 3, fourth attacker. And it's defended 1, 2, 3 times. Therefore, I could actually go ahead and try and attack. Okay, now he's castled. So now let's develop my bishop. So now I'm practically complete with development. The only things left to do could be to get my queen off the back rank. And again, you see so this is actually a good move. So what he's done is he's now centralized his rook, which is like the final stage of development, together with getting your queen off the back rank. So now he's got 1, 2, 3, 4 defenders on that piece. So now, let's just add a fifth attacker. No, I can't. That isn't a fifth attacker. And it would block my bishop. So that would be a poor move, right? So I think it's time now to shift queenie. So I'm going to put my queen not there because, for the reason we mentioned earlier, pawn fork with this move. So that's not good. So I've just moved my queen off the back rank. Now I want to centralize my rooks, and I have now completed development. Okay, my opponent is one step away from completing development because he's still got his queen on the back rank and the rooks are not connected. Now, So what I want to think about next is the middle game. So what are we meant to do in the middle game? Okay, the middle game is all about preparing for your attack against your opponent's king. All right, generally, I mean, in an ideal world, that's what you want to be doing. You want to be building up your attack. Now, in order to do that, you will generally need to improve your pieces. So, improving pieces means generally pointing them at your opponent's king. Okay, so now he's kind of resolved the tension in the middle by pushing the pawn forward. Okay, so it's attacking my knight, and my knight actually only has one reasonable square to go to, so I'm going to move my knight here. So that was a reasonable move. That was a tactical diversion with a point. Okay, and then so improving your pieces. So my knight has now actually made a step towards my opponent's king. So if he was to attack with a pawn now, I think that would be not very clever, because my knight can still go here, you see, and he's weakening his king, and he's also not really improving his pieces. If you look, we've both got rooks on the A file that are playing no part whatsoever in the game, right? So knights are short-range pieces. So in order to improve them and to build towards an attack, they generally want to move towards the king, towards your opponent's position. Bishops are long-range pieces, and they can attack from afar. Right now my bishop isn't brilliant because there's a pawn move again. I don't think that was really called for. Okay, so I could put my bishop here now on c3 with two attackers on that pawn. But I'm inclined now to improve my rook. So I think putting my rook here makes sense. Or the other thing is maybe I want to give my knight an escape square just in case. Let's do that. Just move the knight. Not worried about this pawn coming forwards. I can grab it with my rook. I'm perfectly safe. You can see how the sub 1000 player is making a few too many pawn moves, right? And this one was completely unnecessary. H5, I don't understand. If he comes forward, if he captures, I just recapture with my c pawn, and life is fine. So that's just it's a prophylactic move. I'm just, in case he has ideas of throwing pawns at me. Do I want my knight there? Could come back to here. I don't know. But anyway, it's defending the knight where it is, and it's giving it an escape square. And one problem is it's actually made it harder for me to lift my rook, which was kind of my plan. Oops, no, we don't want to pre-move rook h1 because it's illegal anyway. So it's weird, it's letting me pre-move, but it's not letting me... Okay, so he's gone ahead and done this anyway, which is kind of expected. So where does my knight want to go? My knight could come here, which is actually an outpost, so it can't be threatened. I'm kind of tempted to play that. I kind of like that. It then has the possibility of coming there with check. And it's also attacking the bishop, of course, which is currently undefended. So my opponent should spot that. Thank you, Jag. Jag approves. So I'm in the middle game. I want to improve my pieces. This bishop's doing nothing at all right now. However, one good thing about bishops is they can just lurk. Right? They're waiting for a time when the pawns change. So the two main features of the middle game are improving your pieces and then pawn breaks. Pawn breaks is the other big change. So pawns represent, in my view, like the terrain of the game. So if you imagine there's a game like, it's like the golf hole, yeah? Every golf hole is different. So you have 18 holes on a course, and they're all slightly different. Some longer, some shorter, bunkers, elevation, water features, all that kind of stuff. And that's, the pawns kind of create the terrain for the game, and the pieces are the players in the game, okay? So pawn moves, and I stress this an awful lot, pawn moves are actually very significant in chess because pawns can't reverse. They can only move forwards. Okay, so he's moved his bishop. He's spotted the fact that his bishop was under attack, and that's fine. And he's now attacking my queen, also skewering it against the rook. But I now have this move, or I have bishop c3. So the question is, do I want to push him away with c3? Does that help my bishop's prospects in the game? Not sure. Or do I want to put my bishop on c3 and prompt an exchange? It's a very good question. I'm going to play c3 for now and leave my bishop on the board. He can't come here now. He can't retreat. He can't go there. He can't go there because of the knight, so he has to come back either to e7 or f8. So this is a pawn move. So I've changed the terrain right now. Okay, and I've got other ideas. You know, h4 is a pawn break, right? f4 is a pawn break now, and these can really radically change the shape of the game. And you know, the pawn breaks will very often be the start of an attack. Okay, so they could also just be tactical. Okay, so for example, I could even think about c4 now, but then the bishop could come flying back in, so I'm not going to do that. I can't put my knight there now. I can't put my knight there. I do want to think about attacking. So how about lifting the rook? Okay, so centralizing your rooks, you can then lift one rook and double your rooks on one file. That's generally a good idea. So this rook now from a1 could come across to e1, for example. But we're not going to pre-move that, are we? But I think rook to e1, rook a to e1 makes sense. What's undefended? He's got an undefended pawn there. He's got a useless rook over on a8. Okay, now he's lifted his rook. So he was inspired by my idea. Okay, let's centralize the other rook now. So you can see I'm not attacking my opponent at this point. I'm trying to build to an attack, and that's really the key. Notice that this rook here on e6 is also undefended. So what that means is, if I move this pawn, say to f3, black cannot capture the pawn because I've got two rooks looking at his rook. So he goes down a rook. So is that a good idea? Is that something I want to do? I could even play f4, right? And he can't take en passant. And then I'm threatening a pawn in front of his king. Then he recaptures with his pawn on f6. But then my bishop is starting to look a bit more, you know, got a bit more potential maybe. So let's see what he chooses to do. Doubling rooks it can be so powerful, but a lot of beginners just forget to do it. You just kind of leave your rooks in the corners of the board and try and do too much with your minor pieces or your queen. Right, but generally you want to bring your whole army to the party. There's no point launching an attack against your opponent with half an army. Just get everyone ready, and then when you strike, it should be, whoa, final. Oh, that's interesting. So he's pushed another pawn. He's pushed the pawn that's in front of his king, which has to be weakening, right? It's undefended. How about I put my queen on e2? Right, this is now threatening. He's weakened his pawn. He's moved it from a position where it was defended to a position where it's not defended, probably to prevent this idea. Okay, and now he's lined up his queen behind the king, but this is a tactical mistake, surely. Okay, I'm going to capture that pawn with check. So he's got a few options. He can block with the bishop, or he can dodge the king out of the way to two potential squares. Either way, it's starting to look a little precarious. Okay, so what's he going to do? , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , , quite unnecessary. Okay, so now we are, I would say, deep into the middle game. My bishop is also here lurking, ready to jump in. It might jump to a3 at some point to improve its prospects. Or we might think about trying to move these pawns out of the way. But my bishop is actually looking at these squares around my opponent's king. It looks like it's doing nothing at all, but it might have prospects. Even more so now that the king has moved to there. Okay, so I can't come in with my knight because the bishop just captures. Obviously, I can't... If the bishop wasn't there, I'd have checkmate. So does that give us an idea? Like bishop a3 now, threatening to take. Is that the best use of my bishop? Threat of checkmate. If the bishop wasn't there, that would be mate, yeah? So let's throw this in and see if my opponent falls for it. So this is a tactical deviation from the middle game. Because I've seen an opportunity, a tactical opportunity. So what can he do? He can't block with a knight, he can't block with a queen or a rook, they just get captured. If he captures, then it's checkmate and I win. So he can't capture. But if I capture, he's got queen takes, and that also prevents mate. So is that helpful for me, or should I send the h-pawn up the board? Make a pawn break? Or is there something else? I'm going to play this and see what he does, because I'm also still eyeing up this rook here. And my knight is in a very good position on that square. It could be involved in checks, attacks, also, you know, attacks on the rook from there, for example. I can still think about this pawn break with the f-pawn. So if he captures, I take rook, queen can't recapture, you see, because the rook takes queen. So you can't capture with the bishop there. So next, I'm thinking f3 looks interesting. Pawn takes, and I've got two attackers on the rook and one defender, so I win the rook. It's not actually 2 against 2, it's 2 against 1 because I capture the target piece. No, we don't want to do that, do we? Okay, come on, figure this out. So middle game, improving. That's what you need to think about. King safety first, tactical necessities, opportunities or threats, second. Then, if there are no immediate tactical opportunities or threats, then you return to your plan. Okay, what is your plan? Okay, interesting now. So your plan is, if you're in the opening, if you haven't developed, you go back to development, right? Once you've developed, improve your pieces, prepare for the attack, and think about pawn breaks, right? Then the ending is just about finishing off your opponent. Simple as that. Now, so queen f7, hey. See, my bishop is now playing an instrumental role in this game. So if I take the bishop, he's got rook takes, he's got knight takes, or he's got queen takes. Lots of options. So I'm thinking now, actually if I don't take, he can take my bishop with his. So I'm going to just grab that now. And then I'm going to go back to this other idea, this f3 idea. Opening things up that way. Now what if he just ignores the threat and I capture, pawn captures, rook captures? It still breaks open his position. So he's made some errors. He's now got these, you know, he's got these 3 central pawns, but his king's only got 1 bodyguard pawn. Yeah. Got somebody coming down to get rid of some of our cockerels today. Going to give him a new home. Okay, so now he's deciding, okay, and he's gone with the knight. That then gives me an idea. Because now I can play knight h6 if I wish, right? That attacks the queen. The queen will then have to move. it's also defending the rook. So I think that was a decent move. So if I played a like f3 now and he takes, I can take the rook, he recaptures with a knight. Nothing very eventful there. Do I want a pawn break? Do I want to push this pawn all the way up to here? That could be quite interesting. Okay, let's send Harry up the board. Go on, Harry. On your way, mate. Anyone who's a follower of the Ginger GM should now be chanting, Harry, Harry, Harry. If you don't, that's what Jag is trying to say. He's trying to say Harry, but of course he doesn't actually have much of a voice box, so he can't really do that. I actually lose 16 points if I lose this game, so I've got to make sure that I don't. So here's the idea. Pawn comes up here. It's defended by the knight, defended by the queen there. And then I've got ideas of maybe queen comes to here with check, and that will force my opponent to capture with his queen, you see. And then this pawn here can recapture with check, also threatening the knight. That would be cool. So that's my tactical idea. Might not be game winning yet, we shall see. Oh, okay. What are you doing? Where's this knight going? What's his idea? Because now I can just push the pawn up just there, yeah? Push the pawn up. Also got ideas maybe of if the queen should move, I can move this knight with a discovered attack on the rook. I'm just going to push h5 now. Knight can't come to h4, pawn takes there, pawn takes there. Knight's now under attack and knight just has to retreat. My knight's also eyeing up this square on h6. It's like trying to record a video in a bloody zoo, isn't it? One day I'll find a quieter place to record. Go on, the knight simply has to retreat, has to go back here or here, right? If it goes here, there's some tension. But then I can play that as well. Let's see. All depends what my opponent chooses to do. He's actually playing pretty strong game so far. If knight goes here, if I capture with my knight, not much benefit to that really. Also notice that this rook is still yet to play any part in the game. Oh, that's just simply a blunder, unfortunately. Okay, massive tactical blunder. Not only can I capture the knight with my pawn, but I have knight h6 check to win the queen. This is a knight fork, wins the queen. Also then leaves this rook vulnerable. Okay, I would expect my opponent to resign at this point. And the end game, obviously, finish your opponent. So let's see if we get into an end game. We may not. If you can finish your opponent off in the middle game, then so be it. That's even better. Barking dogs and crowing roosters, and it's all a big pain. Okay. I'm going to capture the queen, and then we're going to go into an endgame, because I don't want to be here all day. Okay, now I capture the knight with check. Okay, now I'm going to play f3, because if he takes, I win the rook. If he doesn't take, I'm going to capture, because I've got a barrage now. See, I've got 3 pieces, queen and both rooks, looking at this pawn here. Okay, what am I doing with this? Okay, so he's counter-attacked my queen. I'm just going to dodge out the way. Let's keep this. Let's cut to the chase. Still got ideas of capturing there. Okay, so I'm going to capture here. He has to recapture with this pawn. The other one's pinned, f5 is pinned. Has to recapture with d5 if he wishes to recapture, but then this pawn is still pinned, so I can capture with the rook. And you're in a world of pain. I really don't understand that queen blunder back there. I mean, what a terrible move. He played so strong up till this point, right? What's he thinking? He's thinking, I need to get my king out of there, it's in trouble. He'd have been much better off simply moving the knight, I think. Just put the knight back to here, put the question back to me. There's no immediate mate, but in this situation where he is now, okay, so now he's attacking that, but this is okay. I can just capture the pawn with check. If he interposes the rook, I've got this. Now the king has to move. He's got two squares, f8 or g6, okay. I could capture this pawn, or I could just push on. Let's capture the pawn. Okay, I'm always trying to check king safety. King safety first. Now I've got rook to here. The rook is pinned, so that could force an exchange. Okay. Queen under threat. Okay, my job here is to finish off my opponent. Okay, nothing else. You want to finish it off. Do what is necessary to complete the game. So I'm not going to trade off my queen for a rook, right? Because that is against the spirit of finishing off my opponent as efficiently as possible. So let's go here with check. He can block with either of his rooks, but either way I've got rook here. Okay. And now this is pinned. So the rook could capture me but can't move elsewhere. If that rook comes to attack my queen, then I can capture with the rook there, and he has to come back. Well, thank you, opponent, for not resigning and letting us finish an endgame. So this is it. This is, you know, you just go full bastard in the endgame. Right? Hopefully you've earned yourself an advantage. Here I've got a massive material advantage because my opponent blundered late on in the middle game. So now it is simply a case of turning the screw, doing what is necessary, make sure I don't get suckered and mated at my end of the board, but just finishing, you know, finish the job off. The Roosters are really cheering on this game. They're loving it. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I think we've got 5 or 6 Roosters out there right now. Okay, interesting. So now I can just grab that rook. King can recapture, that's fine. No problem whatsoever. Or rook can recapture. But either way, it's going to end fairly soon. Rook to here. He can't go on this light square diagonal, so he's only got one square he can go to. Oh no, or he can do that. But then I have this. And now whatever he does, he's going to get checkmated very soon. That's checkmate, yeah? Okay, brilliant. So there you go. That's the pattern of the chess game. Let's go over it again. First of all, king safety. Always, always, always king safety. I lost a game today against a lower rated opponent because I was thinking too much about my attack and there was a bishop and queen lined up. I just missed it. I saw it up just after I made my move because I was too excited about my own attacking ideas, and I got checkmated straight off. So king safety first. You can always you should progress with your plan unless there are immediate tactical threats or opportunities to that you can take advantage of. I'll say good game to my opponent, well done. So what should your plan be? If you're in the opening, you need to develop, right? So we've got our system for development. Once you've developed, you are in the middle game. If you get to the middle game before your opponent gets to the middle game, then you can start improving your pieces, attacking. If your opponent's king is still in the middle of the board, you might want to start opening up the middle of the board at this point. So think about those pawn breaks. Think about centralized rooks. Think about doubling your rooks. Doubling your rooks with your queen. Triple up on a file. Break open files, right? It's time to start everything lining up towards that king. And then use pawn breaks where they are helpful in order to break open the position and to open up lines towards your opponent's position. And that's it. And earn your way to the middle game. Hopefully you'll have some positional, tactical, material advantage that you can use. Then you turn the screw and finish him off. And that's it. That should be your chess game plan. Okay, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Chess Bootcamp if you haven't yet subscribed, and I'll see you soon.